Welcome to today's edition of Weather to Watch. It is Monday, the 12th of May, and severe storms are going to become active beginning this week and lasting into early next week as well. Here's the nation's visible satellite loop as the days continue to get longer as we're creeping up in the middle of May here, and we're only about a month away from the longest day of the year. Visible satellite is great at picking out cloud types and features, and you can see the swirl of this latest weather system, and there have been a lot of them lately. This is sort of a reinvention of one that started here almost a week ago. So you can see individual cumulus clouds and thunderstorms building around that. We'll take a close-up look at that here in a minute. Also out west, we have this interesting low that's coming ashore here, and a diverging wind flow. You can see how these winds are going like that, and these winds are going like that. We'll take a closer look at the 500 millibar flow, and sure enough, there's that low centered over Mississippi at the 500 millibar level, and that other one there in Oregon. And so this is still a dominating feature, but as soon as it releases its grip on the U.S., and by the way, we'll show you here why it's important for this to be sitting here, then we can pave the way for what I would call a more traditional flow pattern for springtime, which is going to lead to another tradition of springtime, more severe weather. One thing I want to look at, this is sort of interesting on this next slide here, these are dew point temperatures. Now, for a while, this was actually blocking the return of significant moisture, and it is. If you look in the northern plains where there are southerly winds, dew points are only in the 40s and 30s. And if you're wondering why I focus on dew points, an absolute measure of moisture in the atmosphere, and the higher they are, the more we can lead to unstable air and thunderstorm production. So these values up here in the northern plains are nothing, basically. But look what this low has done. It's wrapped 55, 60-degree dew points around the center of this thing. So that's important because when the low leaves, it's not necessarily going to take that activity with it. In fact, this type of weather system does not necessarily draw down a lot of strong winds, and certainly the airflow here is not from Canada where it is just normally dry. It's a continental area. It's not near any water. So again, I think this is going to leave behind a pool of moisture that the next weather system is going to be able to work with to produce severe thunderstorms. Here's a look at the surface map. The main polar front is up here in southeast Canada. We have another front trailing around kind of ahead of that upper level system here. And then this cool front, Pacific front really, a stationary front, and then this occluded front right here is where we can find the low pressure area at the surface. And if we close up look at that circulation pattern, it's really quite fascinating to look at here. We've got these thunderstorms bubbling up over Tennessee, over Alabama, even Mississippi, even back through Missouri and Arkansas. This time of year when the sun comes out, it just heats that ground up. So those dew points are actually sufficient to get thunderstorms developing readily across the area. Take a look at the surface plot. See if I can find the low by looking at the winds. So the way you read this is this always points in the direction that the wind is flowing. So right there, I'm in Missouri. And they just put an arrow like that. So these winds are going like this. So you can see there's winds here. There's winds kind of coming around like this. There's winds coming around here. There's some wind coming around here. So there's some evidence of this low, but it certainly isn't the kind of low that you would readily identify on a map and go, wow, that's a impressive cyclogenesis or cyclone. That's not what this is at all. Occluded systems are often very weak like this. If we take a look at the radar here, and I recorded this about 4:30, you can see a couple of the severe thunderstorm warnings there north and east of Chattanooga, another one there in southern Tennessee, and likely some of these other ones will be hail producers and maybe produce some brief gusty winds, and that'll be it. But let's take a look at those storm predictions. The official SPC forecast for the rest of today, this actually goes until 7 a.m. the next morning. That's one thing I haven't mentioned in a while. When the Storm Prediction Center issues these outlooks, they're meant to go for 24 hours from 7 a.m. to 7 a.m. So, a lot of times you'll see yourself in this. In this case, the thunderstorms are breaking out readily, so we don't have to explain it. But technically, this does go overnight. So we have this pretty large area of the lowest risk, which is this one here, 1 out of 5. in this area. Also, kind of a regeneration of severe weather in Montana and parts of North Dakota as the jet stream becomes more active. I did show you the moisture is sparse up there, however, so those are going to be probably gusty wind makers and maybe a little bit of hail. Very little tornado threat. Those are very high base storms if they form up there at all. And speaking of tornadoes, there is a 2% chance, pretty much coinciding with most of what I showed you for the day one outlook, except it doesn't include areas back here. But the low-level winds are a little bit more favorable for winds. Basically, just cut Florida in half. And the eastern half of that has that tornado risk here for the next several hours. By the way, and I'll have a link at the very end of the video and in the description. I have a daily severe thunderstorm outlooks graphic movie presentation that I make. So to go out beyond this and to talk about what's going to be happening later this week, and it's pretty significant actually. We're returning to severe weather fully. You can reference that video, which I make every morning, and the one I'll link is the one that was made this morning. Let's go back and look at the tornado season, too. I haven't updated this in a while, but there hasn't been a major update. 724 is the verified number when we normally see about 549. This is an interesting map because it shows the outbreaks. You can see the March 14th outbreak, and then we had that other one right at the end of March, and then we had a couple in April here, and a kind of a clustering of tornadoes in a couple of places here as well. So interesting. And if you want to look at a map, it's going to be hard to pick out all the tornadoes on here, but yeah, there they are. And certainly the more severe ones, the EF3 and 3 pluses, and the EF4 that we see, the EF4s are in red, are clustered basically in two areas, southern Mississippi and then northeast Arkansas and southeast Missouri. The climatology for this time of year, by the way, if you look back from 1982 to 2011 for any severe storm, is centered right over Oklahoma. So this is the normal place where we should expect storms. Now, as you saw on that map early in the season, the storms were centered way over here. It's normal in the winter for thunderstorms and tornadoes to form here, but this was actually a little far north compared to what it would be normal for that period, March and April. But here, this is the epicenter. This is the climatology telling us to look in Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas, and yeah, up into Illinois and more east. And in fact, the forecast that I talked about in this morning's severe thunderstorm outlook video discusses that fact. Heavy rain is in the forecast for many areas, actually two distinct areas. So for the next 7 days, basically the heaviest rain will be concentrated in Virginia and North Carolina, portions of Tennessee, and the mountainous areas too. You can also almost see the orographic effects of some lifting, having produced some heavier rain bands there. And also getting down, this is actually off the coast of the Carolinas here. And then we turn our attention to areas from South Dakota northward into Canada and a small portion of Montana and Wyoming for more heavy rain potential. The darker reds are 3 and 4 inch total forecast. We'll take a look at the latest drought monitor, and actually these two rain forecast areas, this one that I just showed you and this one, come to some good relief, and some maybe even here some good relief is possible in some of those red areas, but extreme southwest Texas and much of the desert southwest still not really going to get much in the way of rainfall. And to be honest, their rainy season is coming to an end until the monsoons hit out here, so they're probably not going to get a whole lot of relief, certainly not from any cutoff systems that would normally do that here over the next foreseeable future, next week plus or so. We have flood watches in effect in most of Virginia, parts of West Virginia, down into North Carolina, and a small chunk of central Mississippi as well. Let's switch gears and talk about the warmth now. Look at this. This is the forecast for Tuesday. We've got 90s in South Dakota and North Dakota, and also look at all this crop of 100-degree temperatures that are popping up in Texas. So the colors mean above normal. So the yellows and the reds and even the purples, and then the greens and the blues are below normal. We'll take a look at Dallas's forecast here. This is according to the GFS. So tomorrow they'll hit 96 according to the models, and 104 degrees by Wednesday, and then pretty hot, upper 90s down dominate the extended forecast with 100s coming back at the end of next week. That gets to be a little bit more of a fantasy as we go that far out. And then Thursday, the heat shifts along with this approaching new jet stream pattern. So it'll be 80 in Chicago on Thursday. Still 100s in Texas, but they've shrunk a little bit down to the south. But much of the eastern and central U.S. will be above normal. And then from the plains, mostly west, with just a couple of exceptions, it's going to be a little bit cooler than normal. And then on Saturday, the central plains warming up a little bit. And we've got a stalled weather system that's moving back north over the weekend. So the front will advance and then kind of go back this way. And that's why we're watching for extended severe weather possibilities in this area. Again, my morning video talks about that as well. Let's take a look at some long-range model data. Well, I'm going to use the GFS here and talk about what's happening over the next 6 to 7 days. So this is the 500 millibar flow. I'm using a deterministic model. This means I'm using just one run and not an ensemble. And I just change my mind on this once in a while. Sometimes I just like to see how bad things can get. So this is the GFS initialized this morning. So it shows that upper level system here at the 500 millibar level. And it also shows the stronger jet stream winds that are coming ashore, and it's leading to that severe weather risk up there in Montana. So let's advance this a little bit and see what happens. This low will dislodge, as you can see here. This is actually Tuesday morning, still kind of stretched out over the mid-Mississippi Valley. But then as we get into Wednesday here, this is Wednesday about noon, we're starting to see a split flow here with one part of the jet stream kind of going off in this direction, another part going on this direction. So this is diffluence aloft that can lead to severe weather, assuming you have unstable air, which does appear to be building. So this is actually the area that we're watching for Wednesday. Again, my video on severe weather that I made this morning will go more into detail on that. But let's go a little bit more now. So that's noon on Wednesday. Noon on Thursday is shaping up to be an interesting day, because these jet stream winds, there's actually two branches of the jet stream that are showing up. This one, that's a shortwave trough, and then kind of a subtropical nature to that. So the SPC is outlined this area here roughly. I'm not able to draw very accurately, but you'll want to watch and see how much instability grows out ahead of that. That's on Thursday. Then what's interesting is on Friday, the SPC did pull the trigger on a severe weather area, kind of generally in this area here. Actually, I drew that too big, but that's okay. Now, this is what's interesting. Watch what happens out here as we go. That was on Friday right there. Now let's watch what happens out there. Let's advance this to Saturday. So that's Saturday about noon. Notice there's more energy, jet stream energy, both retreating and coming up from the southwest. Here's Sunday about noon. Again, pretty strong jet stream winds. There's a ridge of high pressure building over Kansas, so that might slow the weather down there a little bit, but certainly over the high plains, it's taking shape quite readily. And as you can see, we have another weather system that's coming into play here. And that's this. Ooh, I don't want to do that. Wait, how do I undo that? Oh, I did. Okay. The other weather system right here is another trough of low pressure out over the southwest. So to say that the severe weather is going to come to an end, it's come back later this week. It'll be around this weekend, and certainly Monday, even Tuesday, maybe even Wednesday, we'll be dealing with that simply by looking at what I think the 500 millibar flow will be doing. Final thing we'll talk about is the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook that goes from May 17th. That's this upcoming Saturday for the next 5 days after that. And above normal temperatures in the nation's south and southeast. And you can see the dividing line right here, the frontal zone that's going to be the battleground for severe weather. Generally, much of the northern plains cool. California looks a little warm during that time period. And much of the country is forecast to be on the wet side with a pretty good probability, about 60% or so, actually about above 50% chance, 50 to 60% chance of above normal temperature of precipitation where you see the shading in green. Of course, the darkest shading is the highest confidence that it'll be wetter than normal. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.